Yes, now bless now, people. Desmond Rocksteadius at King of the Pizzle TV. Picking back being bull. Oh, I'm a little bit tired. Exhausted might be a stretch, given the grand scheme and spectrum of how one can be awake in relation to tired. I wouldn't say I'm touching exhaustion yet, but maybe erring and flirting on the borderline of being a little burnt out. For the day at least, not in the grand scale. So be patient with me. Be patient with me. Digger, Powerbait. That's what was recommended to me on the Patreon by my very good friend Marcus, who's put me on some good records. We've had a good run with 90s punk rock bands as of recent on this channel. And in all honesty, bruh, you lot, the patrons, have basically just put me onto 90s as a whole. It's funny because it goes to show how things go with the times. If you dress up like the fashion that was 10 years ago, 1 decade ago, you'd be looked at stupid, be looked at funny. Whereas if you dress up like they did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it's cool. There's an endless cycle that reoccurs where things are too soon or they're the perfect timing. And I think this happens with music because given I'm a 90s baby, yeah, given that I started to get into music on a serious basis in the 2000s, started to discover and uncover all of it. At that point, the 90s was outdated. The 90s didn't compare in any way to the extremity I was receiving from the 2000s, which was songwriting, from what I was aware, sound production, you know, metal, punk, this, that, and the third. It was all more intense, more in your face, more extreme. Sound engineering was nowhere near as good in the 90s, although now you see it as organic and valuable in the fact that it's very human, you know, and it isn't like overtly technological and polished and garbage like fodder like it is now, you know, given you're with a major label at least. It's not just, you know, factory line crap. So you lot put me onto a lot of 90s, and it's funny because I'll put out polls, or I realised this last year or so, I put a poll out, what's the best music era? All of you love the 90s. All of the people, even though I've not come into this King of the Pit TV YouTube thing doing 90s bands, because obviously I didn't have an understanding of the 90s because I bypassed it. I was just like, the 80s are the best. From there, the 2000s are pretty good. 70s is granddad. 60s is granddad. 80s is cool, rock and roll. And completely skipped the 90s, and then everyone started putting me onto the 90s, and I can see where you're coming from. Honestly, I can see where you're coming from. I think as far as rock music is concerned, in its own way, rock had matured to such a great standard in the 90s. Different to the rock of the previous generations, but as excellent as ever, and I just never acknowledged that. Now I digress because we're talking about this record. 96, I think it was put out, and I just say that because someone in the comment section referenced it being a 96 record. I don't know where this comes in the band's discography, whether it be a debut or not. I should hope it was a debut because lyrically, there's such an emphasis on being teenagers. There's such an emphasis on teenage love and going to school and so forth. And I think there's a little bit of a gap where you can continue writing about those things, because why not? You know, it's an incredible market and it's a necessity. As if you want to be a successful act or even an artist, I would say, you need to tap into the youth, because if you don't tap into the youth, then no grown person's consuming. They don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the resource, they don't have the attention, they don't have the time in the day to do what the youth can do. So, you know, lyrically, very marketable. Now let's talk about the music. The production was good. The production was good. The production was human, you know, from the very first song. I heard him go ever so slightly out of time, and that wouldn't have been picked up on if I was, you know, doing anything other than paying my utmost attention to the first minute of the song to see what this band was. And that came across as brilliant to me because it was organic, it felt good, it felt like a band coming together, doing band stuff and performing very well. Vocals were very good, reminded me of Less Than Jake at times. Drumming was brilliant. The punk bands of the 90s, or pop punk adjacent bands, or skate punk adjacent bands, if you would call them, I'm a big fan of the drums. I don't think the drums get utilized enough in the styles of punk I like, such as hardcore punk music. They don't drum like this for some strange reason. They take it from other areas of punk and then leave this shit out, and I think it's a detriment to a lot of the acts I listen to. Catchy songwriting. Bass line is a bit shrouded because the guitars are ramped so much. The 6-string guitars are incredibly powerful on this record, and it's not a bad thing. The sound overall is really good. But you know, if you're a bassist, you know, it might not be a record for you per se. If you really like the pop of a bass and a nice punk rock bass, just might not be the right record for you. But don't get me wrong, I don't play on great headphones, so maybe the frequency of my headphones just doesn't serve, the bass line purpose, the bass frequency's purpose. 14 tracks. One of them was a cover at the end, and it felt like at the end of track 12, that was the finale of the record. It felt like the end song, so I don't know if the other two were like B-sides, if not bonus material. It would make sense, because 12 tracks serves more purpose than 14. 12 is perfect for an act like this, at least. Substantial amount of material. Good song lengths. Good consistency. There was no filler whatsoever. I'll rate this record you know what? I'm going to have to be harsh for this one, because for the last couple, I've been very friendly. And I don't want to get into a space where I'm being too friendly with these ratings, because I always like to leave a high ceiling for the right time when hopefully I come across that golden goose that just excites me, you know. I'll give it a 6.5. I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's a good record. The teenage lyrics aren't hitting me. They're not connecting me. I'm not the market for that, so I'm going to have to detract for that. And you can say, well, can't you just say they're good lyrics, regardless if they hit you or not? I can do, but good songwriting will try their best to broaden and generalize and add a air of ambiguity to the lyrical content in order to pull more people in. So I've got to let down on the songwriting to that extent to say, you've not brought me into the big picture here. You've not considered me here, which is completely fine. You know, you don't have to. But in this project, listening to this album, I was on the outside looking in, as opposed to being in engagement with the band that some bands do allow you in. They say this song's about you and I want to uplift you and I want to engage with you, you know. Me as a consumer, I'm not here to see the band. Nobody goes to the event to see the band. Nobody goes to the event to see how good the band is doing and wish for their success utmost. Most people go to these events to self-serve because they enjoy it, because they like to feel good, because they like the feeling they receive through the music. It's self-indulgent, but we don't, admit to it. But that's marketing 101, we are consumers. They create a product which we consume. And as a business, they need to create a product that can market to a specific market. And if I'm not part of the market, I'm not going to be as invested in that product as somebody who is. So I'll stick on a 6.5, but this was a good record. Would you call it an underrated band? I guess that's up to you. I'm going to call it a day. Peace.